What a mess. At 15, everyone has to go to the psychiatrist.
You start off strong. And don't you think that before doing anything, you should try to get to know yourself? You don't have to be ill to go and talk to a psychiatrist or to a psychologist or to a therapist.
It's essential to know yourself, but we fool ourselves because we don't know ourselves. Good afternoon, Fernando.
Good afternoon, Marcos.
What a mess, right?
Indeed, I'm still wondering what I'm doing here.
Well, this is the very first podcast. I'm really excited too that you're here, and we've known each other for many years. You are my personal psychiatrist, the psychiatrist for my family and for most of my clients. I wanted you to come to help me and discuss this idea I have that at 15, everyone should go to the psychiatrist. Yes, totalitarian.
We will clarify this later.
Let's get to it. Let's get to it. First, I want to ask, who is Fernando Boatas?
You start strong. Who is Fernando Boatas? Who am I? Well, how do I explain it? This may sound silly, but I'm my parents' son. This is already important because I believe we all owe much to our education, our environment, and what comes to us from our past. We don't appear in the world just like that. We're born into an environment, into a family, into circumstances that definitely shape us. I'm my parents' son. I'm fortunate that they were good parents, and that's important too. We'll talk about that later, about the need for parents to be good enough. And I also think it's important to acknowledge that I'm privileged because I live in the Western world, born in Barcelona in a reasonably good environment. I haven't suffered, like so many other people in this world, all the socioeconomic misfortunes that, regrettably, we unfortunately see on the news all the time. Because all of that makes us who we are. Then there are other small things that refine and polish us to end up becoming what we are. But that's what marks us, and sometimes much more than anything else.
Fernando is a psychiatrist, a doctor of psychiatry. Another thing I really like to say, he is an interventional psychiatrist, and shortly you'll explain what that is. And if you allow me, picking up from where you said earlier, what defines us, I'll make a brief introduction. One of my mottos is from Mark Twain. It's a phrase by Mark Twain that says the two most important days of your life are the day you were born and the day you know why, what for. That why, what for, 90% plus of my clients do not answer me, regardless of whether they have had financial success or not. It's also important what you said, because Bruce Lipton, who was a PhD in molecular biology in the 70s and 80s, when everyone believed they had found that the genes were responsible for everything that happens to us, he said, it's not the genes, it's the environment, which you, by the way, have just mentioned now. He also said that when a woman is pregnant, through the umbilical cord, not only pass nutrients, obviously they pass to nourish the fetus, this child that is coming, but also the mother's mood passes too. So, we land in this world without an instruction manual. We arrive in this world where we did not ask to come. We arrive in this world already carrying our mother's mood and whatever has happened to her. And we also find, between 0 and 7 years, the brain mostly perceives waves corresponding to a state of unconsciousness and imagination. That is to say, to make it graphic for the people watching us and following us, it's as if the head were open like a melon, and everything that happens around it, which you were going to clarify for me now, falls easily inside. So you are continuing with a programming, and we end up behaving under the belief that we make decisions about everything we do, when 95% of our movements have nothing to do with a conscious decision, but rather come from the subconscious. Do you agree?
I agree, but several things need to be clarified. You've said many things in this sentence, in this paragraph, that are very interesting. Let's see if I remember them all, because I think they all deserve to be emphasized. I love the Mark Twain quote. I didn't know it. It's very good. It's true. The day that we are born is very important, and the day we know what for or why is essential. Later we might have time to talk about it, but finding meaning in our life is fundamental. Another one of these sayings, I couldn't say who says it, a life without meaning has no meaning. And when I talk about meaning, I don't mean a metaphysical or religious spiritual meaning. Sometimes it's a very, very everyday kind of meaning, living for my children or living because I want to keep discovering the world and traveling. But that phrase is very good. And regarding how we come into this world, I totally agree. We are born without an instruction manual, but we are born with many things in our brain. We are not a blank brain. We are not, as the ancient philosophers used to say, a blank slate where nothing is written. Many things are already written. There are already many programs embedded. Many of those programs come from our own mother, as you said before, or from our own genetic code. Others also come from the genetic code, but they come from our ancestors, from our own evolution. I mean, the emotion a human being has are identical to those any mammal has. They didn't just appear one day in the head of a Homo sapiens. Emotions have been evolving for millions of years, and we have them in our toolbox, so to speak. But it is true that when we are born, we are practically unable to limit what comes in. We are, as you well explained with that metaphor, an open melon. We are absolutely at the mercy of our environment decisions. If the environment, as I said a while ago, is good enough or healthy that the brain will develop, because this perhaps also deserves to be taken into account, we are born unfinished. Our body develops, anyone can see that. A baby changes, obviously, but the brain does too. The brain develops, changes, progresses, matures, does something called neuronal pruning, which, if we have time, we'll talk about later, and the brain is modified. At first, absolutely at the disposal of the environment. You were talking about 0 to 7 years. From 0 to 3 years is a tremendous time in the brain. We could almost say that it is a window of opportunity for that brain, the person who owns that brain, to acquire many things, many tools, many skills. In that period, and anyone can imagine if they have small children or have seen it somewhere, many things are learned. Praxis are learned. One learns to walk, to stand, to hold spoons, to pick up objects, to speak. In other words, that brain is a machine. It is learning a lot. And all of that comes from the environment. All of that is because the environment is bombarding them with all that information. In the same way that you learn all of this, you also learn emotional functioning. Emotional functioning becomes regulated. We are born with emotions. They're built in, so to speak. But it's in those first years that those mechanisms are set in motion and become attachment. Attachment, which is so trendy and that everyone talks about, and about insecure attachment, anxious attachment, avoidant attachment. Attachments are acquired at that time, from 0 to 2, from 0 to 3, and attachment will mark our lives.
On what basis is it acquired?
Based on the environment, based on parents or caregivers or siblings. That is, what we have around us that will give us our first responses to our way of asking for love and affection. When we are born, we are very helpless. We need everything. We need to eat, we need to be cared for, we need someone to cover us when something hurts, someone to hold us if we're cold, to tuck us in. We have innate mechanisms for asking for it. Crying, drawing attention. Depending on how we are, those responses will be generated. Those attachments will develop. If I cry because I'm hungry and my caregivers, my parents, my mother, my father, whoever, don't satisfy me, or do so in a rough way, it creates a way of asking in me. At that moment, it's food, but another time it will be anything else that nourishes us, which can simply be the relationship, the emotional relationship. An anxious attachment is formed in those moments between 0 and 3 years.
This can make you, later when you're an adult, someone who constantly needs attention.
Of course, that's where attachment is formed. But where I wanted to end this little spiel is that a baby's brain, a newborn's brain, is so open to receiving information that it's a window of opportunity to do many things. A baby born into a family where 2 languages are spoken, will speak 2 languages and will learn them without any problem, because that brain is full of neurons, neural connections, synapses. It's said that when we are born with many more neurons and connections than we need, almost multiplied by 5 or 6, and little by little, a neuronal pruning. What does that mean? It means that as you use certain connections, synapses, or information pathways, they are prioritized and maintained, while others are shut down, disappear, and those neurons literally vanish. They get used for other things. In the end, you're left with a few, which are the ones we're going to use. The more those babies use those enormous possibilities that the brain has, the more resources they will obviously have. That is not a guarantee of anything. It's simply a guarantee of having more information. Speaking by way of example, using computer analogy, it has much more memory, much more capacity. If you don't use them, in the end, you use the 4 or 5 you need. The baby born into a family, as said before, that speaks English, Catalan, Spanish, and German, will easily speak those languages.
No problem at all, not at all.
No problem at all.
But how do those languages get in? Why? Because the melon is open and it goes directly inside?
Our brain is a learning machine. It does many other things, but above all, it absorbs information, processes it, and if it's interested, it uses it. Because that is another thing that also needs to be taken into account. Our brain is embedded within our organism, as with all living beings, to be useful. And usefulness is survival. In an animal, it will use whatever is necessary for its survival. We are somewhat more evolved. Not only does it keep us alive, but it has become an organism that absorbs all possible information. And if it is useful, uses it. If it is not useful, it lets it pass.
We are the result of the emotional journey of our lives.
Yes. I'd like to qualify that a bit. We are the consequence of our emotions that influence our thoughts, and that is interesting. Let's see if I can say a sentence. I don't know if I'll be able to say it, but it's more or less, our emotions condition our thoughts. Our thoughts condition our actions. Our actions are what end up developing our conduct, our behavior. Those behaviors generate habits. Those habits shape our character and our future, our success. Our destiny will depend on our character. Do you know who said that phrase?
Who?
Aristotle.
Well, we're already with our friends, with the Greeks.
400 years before Christ, more or less.
You who are an enthusiast like me as well of history, the Greeks and the Stoics, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, Socrates. It's incredible that when you read and see the phrases they have, personally I use many phrases in my lectures, moreover they're so sweeping. It seems as if we had forgotten about this, never made use of it. Right from the start, when these programs are installed in us, they will already condition our behavior. So, what I find very curious, as I was telling you before, the 90, Ernest already said it in the other podcast, in our podcast 0, because this is the first one. I have visited more than 45,000 people. I've been following many of them for 15 to 20 years. Is that a lot of people? Well, it's a lot of people to have sat down with and talked to. The way I work, I need them to speak to me and explain things and tell me about themselves. It's not many people if we talk about a city or a town or a country, but what I find curious is that when faced with the question of what you have come here to do, the majority don't answer. They don't know how to respond. Because, of course, knowledge, studies, what you may know, all of this is very well.
But it is information.
Yes, but in the end, what's important in this life is to feel comfortable. And, well, is what you do with everything you know and what you do for others. I don't care if a carpenter fixes a piece of furniture, that man is a genius. When I see what a cabinet maker does, I'm amazed. I don't know how it can be done. If tomorrow I have a leak and my house is flooding, bloody hell, the plumber is God to me. And I don't have the slightest idea how to fix a pipe. I'm completely useless. I'm one of those who takes something apart and has spare pieces left over. I have to put in a nail and the hole is like this, and the picture will stay crooked. I'm not handy in that sense. So people, beyond having done well in life, don't answer me. And when you ask, "Are you happy?" they fall thoughtful. I mean, they instruct us and keep preparing programs for us. I'll sum it up simply, make it easy. Grow, study, get a degree. Although that's a bit obsolete now because since the internet exists, knowledge has been democratized. I mean, many years ago, I'm already 60. Yes, the degree was important. My mother used to say, "Marcos, do a degree, doctor, architect, lawyer," and it seemed like it would save your life. Get married, have a house, buy your house. I'm being a bit graphic. Pay your mortgage, buy a car. Things go well. You buy one for your wife, your watch, your jewelry, your summer holidays, have children who go to school. In the end, all this is nothing but indoctrination. People reach 40, 50, 60 and say, "Wow, beyond things going well, something's missing." I mean, this is sad. It's quite sad. So, my fight, my struggle, the fact you're here today with me, and that you're also my psychiatrist. Later we'll talk about it, and I'll also explain anecdotes, and also that last summer my daughter Cindy came to see you. Damn, where is that subject? Where is that thing that teaches you who you are? Where does this begin? Because there are psychologists in school and all that, but who is being taught? Where do we learn? Who am I? And how is that explained to people? Hey, these programs you bring, because it's as if we were a computer, we have an operating system. Those programs, you can uninstall a program, install another. Where is this in society? Where is this in the world? Because there are people who are suffering from childhood traumas. I lost my father, I lost my mother, life is harder, I was raised by my grandparents, things haven't gone well for me. I've had a very harsh childhood, to the point that emotionally it hit me so hard that in my life, I can't recover from it or get out of this. Where is this?
Well, it's true that for many years we haven't paid much attention to the emotional. We are the product of a culture where the message was kind of, you came here to suffer and to follow those patterns you mentioned. Work, have a family, procreate. We are a product of what, and I don't want to get into any mess at all, but a product of a Judeo-Christian culture where it is very good and has taught us many things. But it's also true that it has moved us away from this point of thinking about ourselves, from valuing desire and happiness a bit, and we kept it very, very separate from our lives. It is true that in certain times, more and more attention is being paid to all of this. It's not something that's being discovered now, but we still have a long way to go. Someday in schools, you were talking about how this is taught, it should exist. I don't know very well whether it's included in training programs, but there should be a class to deal precisely with this, the emotional world, how to know yourself, how to discover your future. How many boys or girls reach high schools saying, now, what am I going to do with my life? What should I study? What master or what field or what profession do I choose? And they're very lost because they don't know, since no one has taught them, and even their own parents don't really know where to go. And sometimes we move a bit by learned patterns and by connecting what you were saying. This is certainly automatism in our lives. More or less, I'm going to follow this route that doesn't seem to be going badly. I'm following it, I'm functioning. You do this, and you'll be more or less fine, because I've seen my parents did well or my neighbors did well. We keep doing it until the moment comes, as you said before, when someone says, well, I'm not okay, and the discomfort begins. And this is something you and I have talked about many times. It is a shame because we're driven by discomfort. When something hurts, I go to the doctor or the therapist or whoever and say, hey, something hurts. It's true that sometimes there are clinical situations or life circumstances where it's an acute issue. If I stick something sharp into my leg, I'm going to see what happened. But many times we just get by until one day you say, I'm not okay, or I'm very tired, or no, I'm not calm. I make scenes with my family and don't know what's wrong with me. That is when you ask those questions and say, what do you expect from life? Well, I don't know. And what do you want to do? Well, I don't know. And who are you? That's also a very important question. Well, I don't know. And that's when a person wants time to say, hey, don't you think that before doing anything, you should try to get to know yourself?
Furthermore, the human being is a great survivor. We're designed to survive. I always explain, I use it as a graphic example, because what is ultimately intended with these podcasts that we're going to do, and initially all of you coming are the team with whom I am very fortunate to collaborate. Life drives nails into you. Life gives you blows. There are also good situations, but the good ones don't hammer a nail into you. You keep moving, you keep going. Those nails fall out, but I always say the same thing. The nail has fallen, but the hole is still there. So it's not about plastering those holes and say, look, I'm fabulous, I carry on. No, it's about to stop and work on yourself and solve those holes. Not just cover them, close my eyes and keep walking. Earlier you said two things that come to me conveniently. Talking about young people, last summer, Cindy, my daughter, was worried about this year. When she finishes, she'll be going to university, and she was thinking, what should I study? What should I do? And since she's a bit of a perfectionist, you know her well because she's done the tests with you, which we'll talk about later, her mother and I told her, Cindy, the holidays are for you to relax and to have a good time. When you come back and see Fernando, talk to him, do the emotional driver's tests and whatever Fernando deems appropriate. And in those tests, that we'll talk about later, I actually have one on the table for you to comment on later, you will see what your virtues are, to put it simply, so that everyone understands me, and you will see what your Achilles' heels might be. So we told her, once you've done the test, aside from getting to know yourself better, you'll recognize yourself, and things will fall into place about how you act. You decide to look for a course in which your strengths are enhanced by that course, and your Achilles' heels are not detrimental to you. She came to see you.
Right?
She did. By chance. Well, not by chance, because I don't believe in chance. I believe in causality. She had already chosen a course she liked. That is what she wanted to do, which she then confirmed after talking with you, and you yourself told her it fitted her like a glove. Her classmates are in the same position. Everyone is in the same dilemma. Why do I tell you this? Another thing I've noticed a lot is that most of the people I've treated ended up not working in what they had studied. This goes back to that programming of, I get this far, I have to take the university entrance exam. Bloody hell, my grade isn't enough for here. Not enough for there. Not enough for there, so I apply there. No. Her mother and I told her that what matters to us is that you're happy. If you're happy in a fish tank shop, that's fine. If you're happy dedicating yourself to, I don't know, assembling furniture, that's fine. Later on, we'll see what needs you have or what you set yourself to in order to live as you want to live, and if the system allows you to make a living from that. Then why don't we look for that first? Here's where I wanted to go. There are solutions. There are many things that can be done, but I believe that the essential thing is you. So, the first thing we have to do in this life is find out, who am I? So, look, could you explain what an interventional psychiatrist is? Because later we'll move on to the tests.
An interventional psychiatrist, well, like everything, it needs qualifying, because to intervene. Anyone who treats or works as a psychiatrist or in any mental health profession, a psychologist intervenes. You intervene even with your own silence. The interventionist concept is one I have to admit I adopted. I almost discovered it thanks to you, because it hadn't occurred to me to use it as a definition, perhaps from someone we can talk about later, a Californian psychiatrist called Philip Stout. Let's say it's a person who intervenes, as the word says, without any fear of giving an option, or listening, of reacting, of advising, of saying, look, I see it this way. Why don't you do this? Why don't you look at it from this angle? Look, I'm going to tell you a bit about my psychiatric life. When I began my psychiatric training, my teachers, to whom I am very fond, well, of course, at that time, I have my ears, were basically influenced by psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis is a very interesting way of intervening because you try to, as the term almost says, through words, dive a little into the construction of the person, of their mind, into those aspects they may have repressed, conscious or unconscious. I'm not going to get into it because we would never finish. But one of the things my professors or tutors used to say is that the psychoanalyst does not speak. The psychoanalyst listens, makes small interventions, does not intervene, tries to be practically transparent. In fact, if you've seen it in films, or many people still do it, they sit off frame. The patient or client is perhaps on a couch or in a chair, and the orthodox psychoanalyst, the Freudian, sits out of sight so they are not seen, so their reactions are not seen. In a doctor-patient relationship, there is, let's say, a current called transference, which goes from the patient to the doctor, which is the need to contact you, to establish a relationship of, you make me remember of other people, and I form their associations and relationships, which are called transference. What I transfer is what this relationship means to me. The opposite line, which is from the professional, the psychiatrist or the psychologist towards the patient or the user or the client, is countertransference. It's almost like a sin. Countertransference must not come out. You block it. You must not feel that that patient reminds you of your own child, and therefore you will treat them more lovingly. No. You have to work on it so that it really becomes something detached. I started like that, of course, but over time, I didn't feel comfortable. I also didn't see it working. Maybe because I had no experience, maybe because I had no skill, or maybe because my way of being is different. I saw that what worked for me was the opposite, the relationship. When I visit someone, I react. I show myself. I rejoice. I get sad. I move closer and I move away. I get surprised. I say, man, what are you saying? Or, woman, have you seen this? I give some guidance. I'm very fond of giving tools. By tools, I don't mean hammers and pliers. Sometimes I use a test because sometimes we get stuck and I say, look, answer this. Sometimes I simply use drawings. I really like that. I have a notepad and I use it to make little diagrams so things would be easier, so they could understand them. Well, this was my way of working. When you tell me, hey, I've seen or I know a person or a psychiatrist who does the same as you, I looked it up. There is a very well-known documentary whose name I don't remember, Phil Stutz.
Phil Stutz on Netflix.
Okay, well, but if I do the same, well, no, I don't. I wish I did, because that person is infinitely wiser than me. But it's true there were some similarities in certain things, even the little drawings. And since he defines himself as an interventionist, I thought, well, I must be one too. In fact, besides the documentary, I don't know if he says it in the documentary, he has some books. There is one called The Method, which I think is very good, that tells patients directly, when I have this, such and such happens. Do what I tell you. I don't think if Phil Stutz himself says it in the documentary or in its books, because he has some books that are very, very easy to read and highly recommendable. One called The Method, for example, that tells you when a patient or client arrives and explains their dramas, you do as I tell you. And the first thing you'll do is this and this and this, and we'll see it afterwards. This is intervention. Perhaps the traditional method would be, let's listen to them, see what they say, try to get them onto a path. I'm going to make myself too approachable. If this generates a reaction in me, I'll try to eliminate it. For me personally, it doesn't work, and I think this way of being is useful. Speaking of my teachers, I remember another whom I have enormous affection for. He's deceased, the poor man. One day he told me that when a person talks to you about suicidal ideas and you feel bad, because of course it's a very tense situation, forget about keeping your cool and forget about your status or your white coat as a psychiatrist and trying to be very scientific and clever. Tell them what you feel. Say, I'm frightened. I'm scared. I'm afraid you might hurt yourself. I care a lot about what happens. Doing this does far more good than acting like a psychiatrist and saying, I'm going to give you a medication that will help you with this. Well, that's what I consider intervention.
I think this is essential. This is essential because, now we'll go on with Stutz, I think it's essential because to get to know yourself, you have to find empathy. So I would also like to tell the people who follow us and listen to us not to settle for the first thing they see. I mean, when you have to talk about yourself, when you have to be who you are, you have to tell someone not as a mental matter, but as a gut-to-gut thread. You have to be comfortable, both in psychiatry and in any speciality. That is to say, if we talk about having broken a leg, even if I say, well, I have insurance, if you have insurance, you go to 5 orthopedic surgeons covered by the insurer, because 2 things will happen. 1, when you've seen 5, you'll understand much more what's happening to you, and you'll better comprehend what you have. And of the 5 you've seen, choose the one you had the most feeling with, because that feeling makes your recovery better and faster. And I think the psychiatrist is something really special.
I'll tell you something I think is important. I don't know if I introduced myself at the start because I don't remember, but I am a psychiatrist.
Son of your parents.
Son of my parents. I work in a large mental health organization, Fundación Hospitalaria. And let's say, in my part of the work in the clinic, in the hospital, or in the mental health center, I see people with serious illnesses. Schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. Of course, the intervention there is a little different. That is to say, with a person who has an illness, you have to use a series of tools you haven't learned, body of knowledge to treat that illness. I sometimes explain to my own residents or to the people who want to listen to me, which aren't that many either. To those who are listening, I always say in the mornings, I'm a more conventional psychiatrist. I see people with illnesses, I see people with pathologies, I use all the tools at my disposal, from medications to other therapies. When I finish work and devote myself to other tasks, and I continue to be a psychiatrist, then I no longer see so many people with illnesses. The people I usually attend to are more people who suffer, people who are in distress. They may also have illnesses, but they're that other kind of people. And when they ask me, but what do you do? I converse. What I really do in those moments is converse, because it is in conversation that everything we've been talking about comes out. It is in conversation that you help the person to get to know themselves. It is in conversation that you get the other person to ask themselves their own questions. It is in that empathetic moment you mentioned earlier, that moment of empathy where the person begins to open up a little. Not just to me, I like to hear about their things, but to themselves by beginning to ask themselves their own questions. When they realize, it's true, this is happening to me, I don't feel, well, I'm doing something I don't like, or I'm in a personal situation and I don't know what I'm going to do here, or I want to understand what is happening to me. It is in that conversation that the fundamental step is achieved, which is beginning to know oneself. It may seem we'll repeat know yourself a lot, but I can tell you one thing about philosophy.
Whatever you like.
It is the beginning of everything, of all human growth. Know yourself. Look, I'm going to tell you a funny anecdote. Surely everyone has heard of the Oracle of Delphi, or many people have heard of the Oracle of Delphi over there in Delphi, where there was one of the many oracles that the Greek society...
Explain what an oracle is.
An oracle is a person who, in theory, at least in those days, knows things. Knows and is able to see where the evolution of circumstances is going. At times, you could say that they know the future, but rather than knowing the future, they have a great capacity for intuition and can say, look, this is going to happen. In fact, nowadays, oracle is used a lot in many areas.
And in 300.
And in 300. Even in films. Anyone who has seen The Matrix already knows what an oracle is. One of the most famous was Delphi, where the temple of Apollo stood. When someone, a citizen, went to consult the oracle, at the entrance on the frontispiece, which is the entrance of the temple, it was inscribed there in Greek. I wish I could pronounce it, but I can't. Know thyself. That's where that comes from. Then the Romans adopted it, and from then on, all humanity used it as something fundamental. So the oracle would tell the people who came how the battle would go or how his marriage would turn out. Should I invade Macedonia? And the first thing it tells them is to know yourself. Look inside. Seek your motives, seek your ideals, your desires, and when you know, you come back. Many of these people would leave saying, "This man, well, I have come here from
Sends me home.
Cyprus to consult the Oracle of Delphi, and he comes out with this long, rambling monologue to me." But when they returned, they knew many things. Some didn't even need to return anymore
They had found themselves.
because they had already discovered. Of course, I'm not trying to pass myself off by saying, "I am the oracle," but I like helping people get to know themselves. I always try to tell them when they arrive and feel like working, because sometimes people come for other reasons, and I sleep poorly and I want to sleep better, but if I can help them and say, "Hey, what do you think? Shall we try to move forward this way?" And I always tell them there are like 4 or 5 steps that are fundamental. Know yourself. Accept that you have aspects that are very good and others that might not be so good. Accept growth, accept change, choose a model. Don't be arbitrary. Follow a line, any line, whichever you want. A religion, a philosophy, a personal philosophy, but you have to have a certain line and find a meaning to your life.
Do you think that if we had really gotten to know ourselves from when we were young, setting aside the pathologies, and now I'll tell you why I'm asking you that, in psychiatric hospitals there would be fewer people? Apart from those who already have an underlying or inherent pathology. I'll tell you later why I'm telling you this. Do you think there would be fewer people?
Yes, but not in psychiatric hospitals, in psychiatry clinics.
Well, why am I telling you this?
But absolutely. I just interrupted you. But I think it's worth saying, everywhere, anywhere you go to consult, it's said that the demand for mental health has increased everywhere. Children, young people, adults, elderly, it's increased. They say since the pandemic, before the pandemic. The pandemic, it tore everything apart. But the need to consult, to go to the psychiatrist or psychologist, to mental health services is enormous. There's a huge demand. The demand hasn't increased because of illnesses. The illnesses are the same. The pathologies you mentioned, schizophrenia, unfortunately, 1% suffer or will suffer schizophrenia. When I started over 30-odd years ago, it was 1%. 30 years have passed and it's 1%. Anxieties, reactive depressions, malaise, suffering have skyrocketed, but they've soared in a tremendous way. And a large part has to do with everything we've been talking about. A large part has to do with the fact that I don't know how to live, and I don't know what to do with everything that's happening to me. It happens to me in loads of ways, and I don't know how to metabolize them, and in the end, they turn into symptoms, and the symptoms become, or we can call them illnesses, and the malaise often comes from not knowing what to do with your life, with your emotions, with your rubbish, because we all have it, and that's what's turning us into a sick society.
Do you know why I said that? When I was 13, 14, and I wasn't getting the grades they thought I should, even when my mother was exceptional to me and my father was a very peculiar bloke too, I mean, that's how I turned out. Well, I'll tell that later. So, when I wasn't studying, my mother worked at a clinic called Médico Salus. There were 2. One was the old bullfighters clinic, and the other was precisely a psychiatric hospital on Avenida Tibidabo. So she had me working there all summer. She'd say, "Well, go ahead, go inside." And one summer I went to the psychiatric hospital. I stayed 2 or 3 weeks or a month in one and another month in the other. I went with a nurse with the dressing cart. I accompanied him to the treatments. In the psychiatric hospital, when I went in, they told me, "Don't talk to any of the patients. Don't talk to any of them. Don't you dare speak or give them conversation." I was shit scared there. I thought, damn, let's see, I'm surrounded, let's see what happens. I'm telling you, I'm 60 and I was 13 or 14 years old. There was a gentleman whom I'll always remember who used to carry a thick book about Napoleon. He would come up to me and say, "Marcos." I'd say, "Tell me." And I'd sit with him and he'd say, "Open the page." I would open the page of that book. I would begin to read, and he would recite the rest to me. I don't know what kind of pathology that is for a man to have such a thick book, and you can open it anywhere. By then, my game every day was I talked to him. Well, every day I got to sit with him for half an hour to an hour.
You were doing a lot of good.
There was a girl tied to the bed. A girl tied to the bed about 18, 20 years old, and they had half sedated, drooling.
How horrible.
And one day I started talking to her, when in fact, if they'd caught me, they'd scold me. So I used to go in secret. I might spend an hour or an hour and a half a day with her, talking. One day, 2 years later, I was in a nightclub, a rare thing for me because I didn't go out much, because with training and everything I needed to rest. At a place in Casteldefels called Tropical, which was a spot by the beach and so on. And I'm there and someone grabs me by the neck from behind. I was stunned. I turn and it was this girl. I say, "But what are you doing here?" And she says, "Well, look, in the end I got out." And she tells me, "Thanks to the conversations I had with you every day."
How lovely.
So, bloody hell, do you know what happened? That I used to talk to everyone there. So I spoke with everyone. Listen, I'm not a specialist. I'm not the one to say, but I didn't get the impression that those people were so ill to have to be locked up there.
Well, let's see.
Obviously, I haven't got a damn clue.
It's possible they were unwell. It's possible they had illnesses. It's possible they needed admission. But it's absolutely certain that the isolation treatment tied to a bed, it seems outrageous to me. Not speaking to them doesn't help. It doesn't.
The first thing they told me, don't speak to anyone ever.
The word is curative. It's a miracle. The human capacity to heal through the word, whether you call it logotherapy, or psychotherapy, or whatever you want to call it, is extraordinary. Human beings have an extraordinary capacity to harm themselves or to harm to his,
Extraordinary.
to his peers.
Extraordinary.
We also have an extraordinary capacity to heal ourselves. And the greatest tool to heal ourselves is the word. Then there are many other things. An act of kindness heals many situations. But the word is fundamental. So denying those patients you were describing, the word is criminal. Talking sometimes does much more good. Well, what can I say? I'm a psychiatrist and I use many medications, but sometimes a pill simply given, "Here, take this," is of no use. A pill needs to be given in the context of a meaningful conversation, explaining, "Look, we're going to do this, work a bit, and then you give the pill and explain what it's for and what you hope to achieve with that medication." Don't sell them fantasies by saying, "This will cure you, it works miracles, it changes things 100%.
It's worth saying you're not a pill pusher, that you are not one for prescribing a lot of medication.
I don't give medication unless I think it's necessary. I have an idea, not mine, obviously. I've said before, there are people much wiser than me, and I follow those people who consider that medicines are useful because they produce changes, alterations. Some say an altered state of consciousness, but one that is beneficial. Also, it's very easy to understand. Let's use an analogy, but a very simple, everyday one. If I have the flu and a fever, ibuprofen will bring the fever down, but it won't do anything to the flu. The flu is a virus that will laugh when it sees ibuprofen. It'll see it pass by, and it'll ignore everything. And the person who has the flu, wow, ibuprofen helps because it lowers the fever and you feel a bit better. Talking about medication involves a trick of words. Look, I'll give you an antidepressant. It's an antidepressant. How wonderful. I wish antidepressants existed. I'd take them and everything would go away and you'd be happy. No, an antidepressant is not exactly a pill that changes depression. It makes a series of changes in our brain that are useful for people who suffer from depression because perhaps it calms that thought. A bit of a loop, that somewhat ruminative view, that distress, where emotions feel overwhelming. It even sometimes tempers sadness a little, and that allows you to face the circumstances that may have generated that depression, or if there is no circumstances, it calms it. And there are depressions that don't seem to have an explanation, and that may be innate, intrinsically genetically determined depressions, but that are calming, but it is not an antidepressant. And on that note, I'm going to mention one of those people whom I think is wise, a French psychiatrist called Joanna Moncrief. She has some very recommendable little books. There's one called Talking Straight about psychotropic drugs. It seems to me she makes a distinction that's very easy to understand. If you make a pharmacological classification based on the drug and speak of antidepressants, antipsychotics, you're cheating. If you make a classification based on the illness, depression, antidepressants, psychotics, psychosis, antipsychotics, you're cheating. You have to make the classification based on the drug. The drug does such and such. In fact, it's always used as an example. Alcohol is a marvelous drug. It produces a state when you have anxiety, shyness, the nightclub you mentioned because you're a 2-meter block. You must have been very handsome when you were young.
Thanks, I'm ugly now, aren't I? Thanks.
But if you're there a bit nervous and you have a little nip of whiskey, well, maybe that gives you a bit of a boost.
Okay.
It's not a medicine. It produces an altered state of consciousness that can be useful at that moment. Drugs are something similar. They produce a series of very beneficial changes when there is a situation in which the brain doesn't work, and then that helps you. But I'm not a psychiatrist who thinks you should only give pills and take this medication and you'll be cured of the disorder.
That is to say, if there is no underlying pathology, you use it as a vehicle to reach a particular place.
Of course, when necessary.
Temporarily, if necessary.
Not a pain because you have a spike stuck here. Well, you have to pull the spike out. Now, if you give me something to anesthetize, better, because it hurts me a lot. Now, if you only anesthetize my knee, my spike's still stuck here, what are you doing? Sooner or later, you'll have to face reality. And the fact is this pain comes from somewhere. And many of those situations I mentioned earlier that we intervene, which is distress. If you can temper the distress with drugs, it's true. An anxiolytic, a benzodiazepine. Hey, I can't sleep. You take it and you fall asleep. Okay, maybe you need it. But if you're only going to do that, you are disrupting that person's life. Because that benzodiazepine will end up affecting the brain. And you don't intervene in the causes that have produced that insomnia. You'll make them chronically dependent of that medication.
If I remember correctly, I think this was George Bernard Shaw, an Irish playwright. He said, I think he said this: human beings have a habit of blaming circumstances for everything that happens to them. The people who succeed in this life, in this world, are those who get up in the morning and look for the circumstances that are favorable to them, and if they don't find them, they create them. Don't you find that people come to see you and say, "Doctor, I'm getting divorced, I'm having a terrible time, I'm suffering badly. Give me something," as if it was something you have to solve and it's not my problem.
Yes.
I mean, hey, sort it out.
Yes. That's the easy option. The easy thing is to put everything outside. Look, when you were talking about the nails, you have nails and they've made some holes. You pulled the nails out. You no longer have the nails, but the holes are there and they keep affecting you and they keep interfering in your life. If you're not honest enough to realize this, and not brave enough to say, listen, I want to know where my holes are, then, in the end, you look for the problem outside and you look for the enemy outside. Look, a very simple and very silly example that people also say, if I burn myself, imagine that I burnt my arm making a sandwich at home for my son. I burnt my arm and I have a burn. You come and say to me, hey, Fernando, touching me, and I go, blimey, what a brute you are. That's enough. Are you the problem? The problem is that you are a brute? The problem is that I have a burn here, that I haven't treated, and that I have covered up, and that I've forgotten I have it. The problem isn't you, but humans do that. Humans, okay, some humans, you are the brute. Hey, why are you doing this to me?
This comes at the right time for me too. The shadow. The shadow. Phil Stutz.
The shadow? How nice.
The shadow. We blame. We always look for the solution outside. It's like, I've had a shitty life. It's like I have a boss who's a son of a bitch. It's like my wife doesn't pay me any attention to me. It's like that one's a bastard. It's like, bloody hell, I've had bad luck in life. The solution is always within. Phil Stutz talked about the shadow. Explain what the shadow is so people understand it. The last conference I gave, the one I gave at the Hilton Hotel in person, which is what I'm like. I'm a bit fed up with all things digital. Digital is all very well, but I don't like it. I like to talk. I want to see people. I want to see an audience. I want to feel people when I speak. There were 80 people at a general meeting, and I said, here we are, 160. We are 80 plus the 80 shadows you have, which as long as they're not recognized and given their proper place, you will be 160. Explain what the shadow is, because I think this is interesting for people to know it and become familiar with it, to begin to be aware that we have things to repair.
Okay, I'll lead into it to avoid starting off so abruptly. Otherwise, we don't know where this comes from. Phil Stutz was a psychoanalyst and uses some very accessible, very interesting, and very handy formulas and tools so that people get to know and understand themselves. He talks, before the shadow, about the X part. The X part will be like our repressed parts. We have a functioning, a consciousness, let's say, that allows our daily functioning. But many of these things that happen to us and that have happened to us are not so present in consciousness. Some we have a little further back, and some we have absolutely repressed. But they exist, and they condition us. It's a bit like what we were talking about before.
We don't know they exist.
Well, we have them. We don't even want to see them anymore because we've repressed them. We've removed them from consciousness. I don't even want to know that I have this. A bit like the example I gave earlier about the burn. If for some reason I were ashamed of this burn and don't want anyone to know, I wouldn't say anything. But if you touch the burn, I jump and blame you. I blame you for doing this to me. That would be the X part. We don't know it. The shadow is a bit different because we see the shadow when we turn around. There is my shadow and it goes with me. What I don't like because it's a shadow. And what I try to do is not to look at it. And I look ahead. And if I stop even a little, I know it's there. And the shadow is made up of all those things, our painful memories, our images of ourselves, the parts we are ashamed of, which we know we have but try to keep hidden and clumsily repress. We don't actually repress them. They don't disappear from our consciousness. They're there, but they're like a shadow. They accompany us. If I look, I see them. Sometimes they can be, well, I don't know. I'll use myself as an example. I may seem very comfortable here, but I'm not because I'm very shy. These things make me feel very embarrassed. I don't like social media at all.
Sorry for putting you on the spot.
You've got me into this. But deep down, I'm a little embarrassed. I'm shy. As a child, I was very shy, really extremely shy. I'd turn red and go to a corner. Sometimes I honestly thought I was stupid for being shy. It bothered me, and I'm very reluctant to think about that boy, that little Fernandito of 8 or 9, 10 years old, who really seemed a bit phobic. And that was my shadow for a while. I tried. I didn't even want to know who he was. Well, this is almost a self-taught formation. But thanks to all of this, in the end, you connect with that child. And people talk a lot about this, the wounded boy. In the end, you connect and accept it. And you say, come here. And you accept it inside, and you accept that you have those parts and that your shadow is yours, even if you don't like it. It wouldn't amuse me at all watching a film of me from when I was 10 years old, because they would look at me and I'd say, how awful. I was like that at school. I used to hide. I didn't dare to tell a girl, how cute you are. And now I look at him with affection. I think, look, poor thing. At that moment he was like that, but now I've changed. And I have that shadow, evidently. Sometimes I turn and I see it, but it doesn't hurt me so much anymore. Stutz tells us and tries to have his clients, his patients, to connect with this part, with this shadow, accept it, talk with it, give it, so to speak, conversation, because that way it starts to be illuminated and it begins to lose its power. It moves from the shadow into the penumbra. It's okay to have parts of ourselves in the penumbra. We can't have everything in front of our consciousness. We all know that we have things we don't like. This ties with what I was talking about earlier, knowing oneself. Knowing yourself is being brave, being honest, being able to say, okay, I have these virtues, I have these talents, but I also have these parts that I don't like so much. I have them, and I must accept them. One can say, I accept that, I'm a bit jealous, or that I'm a bit envious. It's okay. It's okay as long as you recognize it, and don't let that condition your life, that you try to change it, that you can recognize it and say, look, this is coming from my shadows, or my hidden parts, or my repressed parts, and you are able to accept them, able to acknowledge them, and almost be sportsmanlike about it. Accept and say, look, I have this aspect that isn't my favorite, but I have to accept it. And then another fundamental part is not only about knowing yourself, but once you discovered that there are things that you don't quite like or aren't exactly the most refined things in the world, a willingness to change, because that's important too. It's not enough to say, it's true, I admit it, I'm a bit cocky. Well then, stop being that way. Okay, try not to be, and when that little surge of cockiness comes up and you want to say, what nonsense are you saying? Say, no, be careful. I'm not going to let myself be carried away by my impulse or by my driver. We might talk later about the drivers. So I'm going to try not to let this driver carry me away, because it's not right. What if I'm a person not prone to helping? Because that's my personality or my driver, and the helpfulness driver isn't very developed. Well, it's okay, nothing wrong, but maybe I'll have to do it artificially. It doesn't come naturally to me, but I'm going to help you. In the end, it's about being honest enough to accept that we have parts that are very transparent and very clear. We have some parts that are a little more in the shadows. To try and bring those shadowed parts into the penumbra, to get to know them. You don't have to spend all day obsessing over our way of being. But at least we should be aware of them, that I can turn around and say, yes, I was like that.
Phil said that when you have such a dark shadow, like we were saying, you always need external acceptance to feel good.
Yes, of course.
And that once you tell the shadow, well, you're part of me, could we say that when you understand it, you accept it, you look for those, let's say, weak spots you have and work on them? You no longer need acceptance from the outside, instead it's from the inside out, because in the end the solution is within. Could we say that the shadow disappears? Could we say it disappears then?
Well, it disappears or moves into the penumbra. That is, the shadow accompanies you and is there. The memory of some things of yours that you haven't liked and still not please you, but you accept them in a different way. They no longer condition you, you no longer try to hide them so that people will value you and see you and applaud you. No, because you no longer need that. It's no longer the need to please. You feel good about yourself. The moment you start to feel at ease, life is much easier. Relationships are much more honest. The conversation is no longer based on seeing whether they'll notice some things I don't want them to notice, but rather it's relaxed and calm. Yes, I'm like this. I accept myself that I'm this way, but I function and I'm attentive to you because I'm no longer concerned with keeping everything I don't like behind me, so it won't show. Life is much more comfortable.
Get yourself an interventionist psychiatrist, and at 15, all should go. What, too totalitarian?
Yes, a little.
We're going for the drivers. We're going to tell people who listen to us and watch us. We're going to offer solutions. I'll give mine, because it's the one I use with my team. You're my psychiatrist and my family's. And Marcos is crazy. Yes, I'm crazy as a damn sprinkler. It's like, how many times a year we talk and I say to you, hey, I don't have anything special to tell you, and I start talking and I get on talking, and so you've managed to give me a lot of perspective, a lot of insight into what I'm like. It's still happening to me. There are people who say, Marcos, I had a really hard time because my company went under because something happened to me. I got divorced, my son, such and such and such. And they tell me, I had to see a psychiatrist for a year. And they even lower their tone of voice, you know. I mean, no, I think that if you find someone like I found you, and I refer my clients to you, we have to go even when nothing's wrong. So don't wait for the sky to turn grey, for the wind to pick up speed, and for cold rain to start falling, because it will turn into a storm, into a hurricane. I do understand that when you have a major crash, since there is no instruction manual, you don't know what to do, you don't know where to go. You have to go to a professional. I understand this perfectly, but it's when nothing's happening that we should go and talk. What we will achieve if we go a couple of times a year or 3 times a year to have a chat without even knowing what you want to talk about, What you'll gain over time is self-knowledge. That is, knowing who you are. It can help you understand what you're doing here and give you resources so that when a blow comes, you can face it differently. In other words, you might get switches you can flip. When the sky starts turning grey, switch one. If when the wind starts picking up, you hit switch two. It starts raining cold, you flip the third one. Meaning, don't wait to go only when things are bad, when everything's already falling apart. So the main thing, the essential thing is get to know yourself. A good psychiatrist, I say this from my own ignorance, though I don't think it's really ignorance, someone interventionist, someone who finds that link, that feeling with you, I think that can be decisive, so that tomorrow I don't end up taking the wrong career path and dedicating myself to something that isn't for me. People say knowledge takes up no space. Okay, but why spend 5 years in a career, medicine, business, whatever, if in the end I'm going to do something completely different? Well, no. Maybe I could invest this time in something else, or use that knowledge for something different. And the most important thing of all, I really like the poem Ithaca, because it reflects very well what human life should be like. It seems like we're always chasing a goal. I have to achieve, I have to conquer, I have to arrive. And what this poem says, which everyone can listen to at the end of this podcast, and if they don't want to listen, just skip to the end and that's it, is that what matters is the journey. That is what you're meant to enjoy. It tells you, don't be in a hurry to arrive. And it feels like we're going at such a speed that we don't even notice anything that's happening here. To arrive where? Arrive where? Then you hit 40, 50, 60 and you say, hang on, things are going well for me, I have money, a family, my wife. What the hell am I doing here? Why don't I feel genuinely okay if I'm not missing anything? Of course, that thing what happened when I was young, I lost my parents, this, that. Today it's killing you. The shadow you've been dragging becomes a heavy backpack. So all of this, if we went to a psychiatrist at 15, just saying, I once asked you, what's the right age to come to talk to you? And you said, well, at least when you're around 14 or 15, when you've got some sense of things. How many things wouldn't happen? How much suffering would we avoid? How much better could we manage the bad things that happen in our lives?
Look, let's clarify this a bit. First, I completely agree with you with what you're saying, and I think you've mentioned it several times throughout the interview, and the car analogy is spot on. I mean, you have a cool car, you buy yourself a Porsche, and you take it to the shop so they can check it regularly. You don't wait for it to break down. If one day something goes wrong, of course, you take it in right away. But if not, you go for your regular checkups, and that's fine. Human beings do the same with a lot of things. Or at least I hope most of the people listening to us do. Once a year, you get a blood test. At the very least, you get a blood test. Not because you're unwell, but because it needs to be done. How is everything? Well, great, everything's perfect. Look, this is all good, you can go. But the following year, you'll do it again. Of course, if you're deficient in something, you'll go. But if not, you're simply doing your checkups. With mental health, people don't do it. For whatever reason, for the reasons you mentioned, because we're a bit embarrassed, because we lower our voices, I go to the psychiatrist. But you don't do regular checkups to see how your mind is doing, how you're functioning, how you're managing your emotions. People don't do it, and maybe it's a good idea. In fact, I recommend it. You don't need to be ill to go talk to a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a therapist, something along the lines you mentioned, someone who contributes something to you, someone you have the necessary connection with to move forward. And of course, in my humble opinion, that's more or less the path. Trying to get to know yourself, trying to see how you manage your emotions with whatever school or approach you prefer. It doesn't have to be the way I am or the way I like to do things, but at the very least, it should help. You should walk out of that session saying, well, that actually did me good. And you were asking me, at what age should someone start? Well, until you're 14, 15, 16, you're not fully formed. A moment ago, we talked about how a baby is born with a practically open brain, so the whole environment can influence it. With all those neurons firing, an astronomical amount of neural population in order to function and grow, and then that pruning happens, and little by little, it all gets refined.
Some people end up getting completely pruned.
But there's another moment. There are two moments. One is this. Birth is a window of opportunity, but there's another extraordinary window of opportunity, which is puberty. With the hormonal storm that appears in our body, the brain goes back into almost baby mode. That brain isn't fully developed yet. It's once again receiving a ton of inputs. It is also interesting. Anyone interested can look it up online. Nowadays, neuroscience has advanced a lot, and there are always ways to see how the brain works. There's PET scans, positron emission tomography, functional MRI, which allow you to practically see the brain in action. It's a bit of a trick because the brain doesn't have lights, but you can use computer software. You can say, look, highlight the parts of the brain that are consuming the most glucose in this color. That's why sometimes neuroscientists say things like the brain lights up here and it lights up there. There aren't actually lights in the brain, but you can see it. How does that brain mature? When it's born, the brain is just starting to develop, and you can see it gradually losing neurons as it matures. Brain maturation happens from back to front. The first part to mature is the occipital cortex. Slowly, it moves forward to the emotional areas. By ages 7, 8, 9, and 10, as I said before, emotions are already in place. The last part to mature is the entire frontal region, where we are, specifically the prefrontal cortex and the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex.
Let's just say frontal.
This is where we are, and it's the last part to mature. In an adolescent, the area is practically boiling. It still has a lot of neurons. All that pruning still has to happen. Their personality still has to be built, although the emotions are already there, and that's why there's this imbalance in puberty. Pubescents are usually extremely intense emotionally. They feel everything with a terrible passion, but sometimes they still don't have the appropriate rational filter, and one day they tell your father, I hate you, or whatever, and the next day, I love you so much. That brain is like a machine that's feeling lots of things. It's a window of opportunity to intervene, and it's a window of opportunity to polish things. Is it the right time to start coming to see you or to talk? Yes, it's the right time to think about all that. You can do it with a psychiatrist, you can do it with a psychologist, you can do it with parents who are good enough, or with teachers who are good enough, or with a school tutor trained who can help them process all this information. But it must be done allowing free will. Of course, most will do fine because human beings have an enormous capacity for survival, but they run many risks. Maybe it's not the time, but substance use at that moment, smoking joints is terrible. Listen, I had a teacher, very well known, I won't say his name, but he is a very well known person in Barcelona, who used to say, tell your youngsters to smoke joints when they're 22, if they want. But not before 22.
You probably should say the name.
No. Better that they don't even touch them until they're 22. Well, everything is arguable. Maybe people should never smoke. But what's important, what I was saying, there's a terrible risk of damaging an adolescent's brain. There's also a wonderful window of opportunity to do good. And this whole spiel I've been giving you ties in with what you were saying about 14 or 15. It's appropriate for them to start going to be seen then? Yes, it's a good time to talk about these things. It can be with a psychiatrist who talks, like I do, who chatters on a lot, or it can be with a tutor, as I said before, or with someone who has some kind of rapport with that person. It can be a father or a mother with whom they have a very good relationship. It usually doesn't work because with fathers and mothers, different kinds of relationships are established. But sometimes it's not easy to talk about certain things. Sometimes an adolescent prefers a reference adult figure who isn't exactly the father or the mother. But anyway, the point is that it's the time to do it.
I think this should be outsourced, and I think we should, I say it from my experience, because many of my clients go to see you. We're now working with you and with the sleep doctor, who I'll see on Friday, to finish discussing my protocol. I dedicate myself to slowing the aging process, and I have fairly extensive tests to identify people. The first of them is a conversation of at least an hour and a half, and we're looking with you at introducing these initial tests so that you can make an assessment. And another one I'm discussing with the neurophysiologist, so that when I present the results to the person, I can say, look, your sleep works like this is functioning healthily. So returning to this, I think it's better to go outside. You've said it, parents are parents. The school teacher you absolutely love is the school teacher you absolutely love. But I think it's important to say, I'm going to go. I'm going to go find a psychiatrist with whom I have a rapport, or a psychologist, or whatever you want. Since I idolize you so much, for me it's an interventional psychiatrist because that's what works very well for me. And all my clients who have met you are delighted. I mean, I'm going to see someone outside. I'm taking a step forward.
Yes.
I also want to de-dramatize the role of psychiatrist. I mean, I'm happy to say that you're my psychiatrist, and you've given me a lot and perspective. It helped my daughter the other day to say, I'm not going to worry anymore about university. Her classmates are the same. Tell them to go, let them take the tests, of course, because they'll take the weight off their shoulders. They might end up by points or whatever, in a degree that isn't right for them, just for the sake of doing something. We, her mother and I told her, listen, we've never pressured you to study. The truth is she's an excellent girl because she handles everything perfectly. She's very hard on herself. But what matters here is that you're happy. Take whatever comes from somewhere that works for you and makes you happy and content. It doesn't matter what you do. The important thing is that you don't do something because you think you have to do something that won't be of any use to you.
For that, you need to know yourself a bit, because maybe you think that this makes you happy, which is also important. We deceive ourselves and you think, no, what I really want is this.
But we deceive ourselves because we don't know ourselves.
Sure, but then you start to get to know yourself and you say, crikey, it's not Cindy's case, of course. But how easy is it to say, I want to study medicine. Mine, my profession, a lovely profession. I want to study medicine. Okay, and it turns out you're not very empathetic. You don't like people. They annoy you. When someone talks to you, leave me alone. You also don't quite understand suffering very well because you're more like, come on, don't complain so much. What are you doing in medicine? Or you want to make a lot of money. Medicine is very much a vocation. If you know this beforehand, well, maybe one day you could become a famous doctor and earn a lot of money. But if you go into medicine, you have to keep in mind that you need to enjoy science. You need to enjoy the vocation. You need to enjoy working with people. You have to be capable of being very generous, very altruistic, giving, and accommodating.
You've just taken out half the doctors.
Well,
I always say that there are professions that should be required to take the emotional drivers and motivators tests, no exceptions. And if you don't pass, you can't enter, you just can't. Come on, let's get to it. Let's give solutions. What is that thing you always tell me? That I'm a big fan and that I've taken them? Maite, my wife, has taken them, Cindy has taken them, most of my clients have taken them, and I think anyone who comes in the future will take them from now on. So what are drivers and what are emotional motivators? In fact, I have a profile here so you can explain it later.
it's a tool, and I know you're a big fan.
You play it down, but no.
I play it down because deep down I
see it as really important.
I put tests where they should be. Sometimes they're useful, but if you have enough time to, as you said, talk for an hour and a half with someone or an hour, a meaningful conversation, a conversation that's not based on me talking and you listening, but on me asking you,
I'm honest and
posing powerful questions. They are open questions that allow you to explain yourself, and I mean, generically, not me personally, but the person who listens to you or who does this has the capacity to understand, to listen, to interpret, to form a picture. Sometimes tests are completely unnecessary. Sometimes I can do this test for you or for people I know, and this will come out.
Yes, but not for you, for the person. Seeing myself here sometimes helps me. You already know me, but what do I take away to know and work on who I am?
Exactly, and that was the nuance I wanted to make about tests. So I use them sometimes. Specifically, I like this one a lot because this is very easy, very simple. It allows a person to express some of the behavioral reactions, somewhat innate, that we all have very well. And I'll explain now more calmly what I mean. We are all born, as we've said before, with a series of programs. Let's put it that way, as if they were recorded on us, as if we were a computer into which a series of programs have been inserted. Some of those programs we carry from time immemorial, from when one day the hominid stood up, but others are programs that are installed practically at birth. That's a bit of the basis, but from the moment we are born, the environment begins to incorporate them into us. It would be something like drivers, inputs that are put into us. To put it more simply, I think it's very graphic. It's what is sometimes said about the laws of robotics. in the films, Asimov, who said there are 3 laws of robotics. The robot cannot harm a human being, and the robot is going to do harm, and something blocks it. Well, those messages that we have recorded that in some way condition us, sometimes we know we have them, but sometimes not so much. Then, some people who worked on this topic, a certain Taleb and others, many years ago, pondered these. Let's say inputs or mini-scripts that we have inserted, and more or less came to the conclusion that there are about 6 that are universal. I mean, the Western world, I insist, because these drivers or these inputs, these motivators, do not appear out of nowhere. They are inserted by culture, by the environment, by the society we live in, by our parents, by our first experiences with others. They are imposed on us. These are not the same here as perhaps, I don't know, the Maori community. In the Western world, they are more or less these. Basically, there is a driver that conditions us to be strong, to present ourselves as tough and destructible. Sometimes it's useful to understand this driver as a kind of mandate, a command we have that is telling us, you have to be this way. The mandate, in this case of the strong, is endure. Endure, endure, endure. Some people have it more pronounced and others less so. We all have it. We all have a bit of everything. This driver, for example, was very typical some years ago. Now perhaps increasingly less so. Men don't cry. If a child cries, culture, the father, the mother, friends, society tells them, no,
Don't be weak.
don't be weak. And you start recording it in your mind. You're not fully aware of it, but it gets recorded here. You have this input, resist, resist. And one day, you're walking down the street, you bump into something, you fall to the ground, everyone comes running up to you. Are you okay? You, no, 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 no. I'm fine, I'm fine. It's nothing. Nothing's wrong. But when they leave, it's painful. It hurts. Why? Because you don't want to show weakness. Resist, resist. Okay. Another input we have, which is very, very universal, is complacency. It's the I'm going to give mindset. In fact, the message would be give. We could phrase it like this. Give, because if you give, you will receive. People will like you more. Everything will go well, and you'll be seen as a very loved person. We all have it, and we all probably have some tendency to be compliant. Some people have it more, some people have it less. I insist, it's normal for everyone to have at least a little bit of this.
A little bit of everything.
Of course, sometimes this driver or this input or this motivator is so strong that it creates discomfort because you don't realize it and you keep giving and giving and giving, and you go from being a generous person to almost being servile. One day, you're working on a report that you have very little time to finish, and someone comes up and says, "Oh, I ran out of a pen. Can I use yours?" Wow, now I won't be able to finish the report, and then you feel angry, thinking, what's happening to me? Why am I doing this? Because it's inside you. Another very common one is perfectionism. Perfectionism is the message our brain might give us. In this case, it would be shine, be perfect. Well, more or less, everyone has it. Some people have it stronger, some people weaker. Those who take it to the extreme are people who are super demanding. Everything has to be perfect. They always aim for the maximum. They don't settle for less. Sometimes it can be a bit tiring for those around them because it's always about the best. I don't know if I got lost. No, now I remember. The next one, or one of the next ones, which is also very common, is diligence. To hurry up, get things done, driver. The message here would be do, don't stop. Time cannot be wasted. You have to get these things done. We all have it. And the society we live in is full of people somewhat dominated by this input. They don't stop doing things. They sign up for 50,000 activities, keep going one after another, and don't even stop to think, why? Because they feel they have to do things. I'm kind of dominated by this need to get things done. This connects closely with the next driver, which is the achiever. Achieving, undertaking, acquiring. It's the need to have things, to obtain things, to get things, in this case, material things. So yeah, it's kind of this idea that sometimes it's said we live in a society where we have to do a ton of things, to have a ton of things, and only then do we feel like we are somebody.
But then this is related to what you see in the person. To finish, I wanted you to read this profile as an example and then give a brief summary, because we need to start wrapping up. Little summary. Well, we can anticipate the summary. At 15, look for a psychiatrist you have a good connection with.
Or someone to talk to, in the know.
It has to be a professional, someone who is skilled, a specialist in the mind.
It
doesn't count to go and talk to the guy in the parking lot, although sometimes there are wise people who have nothing to do with it.
That lets you get to know yourself.
It would be, don't wait for the years to pass to find out who you are. Starting at 15, with that revolution you mentioned in the prefrontal cortex, that's the moment to go and discover who you are, because what you do now at 15 will likely safeguard you when you're 30, 40, 50.
Start getting to know yourself from 15 or 16.
That's why I like to say that I would dedicate this program to the 15-year-olds. That doesn't mean everyone else is excluded, not at all. Everyone has to keep working and journey through their personal ithaca, which we'll see at the end. I'll pass you this profile, and then I'll close with a phrase I always like to end the podcasts with. One of those lines I really like. Let's see what you think.
It's easy.
What do you think about this?
Here we see well, it's a way of presenting it. I've sometimes changed it.
Think that those who listen to and watch us can't see it.
Since there are 6 drivers, which are roughly what we analyze, I used to present them in the form of a star, points more or less stretched out, which look very nice visually. But I like this method. Lately, I've been doing it like this because it's more like a series of boxes where there are adjectives that in some way define that position. For example, a person, in this case, with the driver, you have to be strong, leaning towards resistance. They're not just a disciplined person. They show a lot of resilience. If they were at the extreme end, they would be almost invulnerable. But here, they are resilient in the complacency dimension. Surprisingly, because it's rare to see it like this, it's quite an interesting profile. It's completely shifted towards the extreme of not at all complacent. Almost striking. That's the category. We give it an adjective, which is a slightly unusual word, egotistical, which is not the same as selfish. An egotistical person has a huge I, a very big personality, and they are very happy having that personality. It's not that they're a bad person, but it's a very developed and intense from that point of view. They don't need to give. They're not obligated to give. They give because they want to. That's also important. It's not that they're selfish and won't give anything. They give because they want to, not because they feel forced. In the perfection dimension, this person is completely off the rails towards absolute perfection. They are a person who seeks excellence in a somewhat tremendous way. So tremendous that they are not selfish with small things. If you tell them, let's build such and such, no, I'm going to study the whole architecture program to see how it's done. And if we're going to build a table, well, I'll know how to make the table myself, and then I'll tell the carpenter how to do it. There are people like that who are interested in everything. It's very good to be like that. Sometimes the problem with these people is that they drag their surroundings into a need for excellence, which isn't always necessary because you don't have to be excellent. You can simply be demanding or optimal in your functioning, and it's fine. Sometimes they can be a bit insistent in this aspect from the point of view of the need to do. This person is very unhurried, does not show an absolute need to occupy their time. It's not like they're in that aspect. I would put it like that. Of course, I'm cheating a little because I know who you're talking about. They are very calm, very tranquil, very self-sufficient person. They don't need to achieve things. They don't need to accumulate awards. They don't need to be recognized. How good you are, or how great you are, or how many things you have, or how beautiful everything you have is. No, they're calm. And I'm talking about him, and I'm already giving a few clues.
I'll ask you who it is.
And then in this last category, which we haven't discussed, which is the be careful one. Watch out, be careful. Well, it's on a more or less normal line, leaning a little towards vigilance. That is to say, this is a person who doesn't live paralyzed by fear, but is vigilant. This is very common in people who are parents. People of us who have children, like myself, well, in this category, we score quite high because we have the need to look after them. So we're a bit vigilant about the environment. For example, an athlete, we've talked about this before, you who visit and work with many athletes in this category, is almost quite better that they are not too vigilant, almost better that they are not too careful. Quite the opposite. It's actually good that they are not too held back, that they are a bit more forward, daring, even risky. We're talking about an elite athlete. Sometimes, when we've done some of these profiles of athletes you've sent me, I remember having discussed it precisely with you. Look at this person. If I were given this, I'd say, I don't know if I'd sign this person as center forward for my team because they're a nice person. They're very compliant. They're a very calm person, a person who already settles for what they have. Well, a center forward might need to be a complete opposite.
Aggressive even.
An ambitious bloke, a certain discipline, a certain tendency to present as very invulnerable. That's why sometimes these loose profiles,
they're useless.
but if you know the person, they explain what they're like, they explain what their life is for or why, what their activity is. It helps you a lot to say to them, look, maybe we could change this because of that part. And with that, I'll finish the spiel. The important thing is that these aren't fixed profiles. They're not the laws of robotics, as if I had them hardwired and I'm a robot and I can't do anything. No, I can bend the rules. I can be against this. It's how I'm built. For example, myself. I score very highly on agreeableness. If I weren't so accommodating, I wouldn't be here because I would have said, that's not for me. I don't come here to speak in public. It makes me a bit self-conscious. But because I'm accommodating, I say, well, okay, my agreeableness tells me, go on, come on. Yes, but I could have said no. Actually, I did it because I like you a lot. We're very good friends. The truth is I'm really enjoying myself. But if I truly knew myself and understood, it might be that I'm saying yes to them, but actually I don't want to do it. That's why it's useful to know yourself. Because if you've got a voice in there telling you, do, give, but my rational conscience is telling me, perhaps it's not the time to give. I can bend the rules, and I can go against this input, against this mandate. I can give myself permission. A perfect person might be able to give themselves permission and say, well, it doesn't have to be so perfect. I'll accept a little less. Or a strong person might tell themselves, well, it's not necessary to be invulnerable at the time.
Who is it?
This strange profile, because it's really strange, there are two outlandish parts, an extremely high perfection score and a low score for the need to please others. So it's a profile of a person who has it's a typical leadership profile. And it's you, Marcos. It's you. I was sure.
I wanted you to read it because thanks to you, I've learned a lot about myself. I might or might not have intuited it, but this is useful to me and has been very helpful. So I wanted it to serve as an example so others can see in a practical way how far this goes. So from here, because I think we're running out of time, well, you know, I'm very happy. I wanted to continue. Look, I wouldn't rule out us doing another one because I have loads more things I would have liked to ask you.
Me too.
Following this.
I have many things to
But
say.
I'm very happy that you've come. Have you seen that in the end it wasn't that bad? I'm not into this either. It's the first one I do. And besides, I'm excited that it's with you. And to finish with that, I always say there's another phrase that is vital for me, like the Mark Twain one, which is, if the future doesn't excite you, you're in the wrong present.
Oh, very good.
So I want people to think about this along with everything you've explained.
I didn't know it.
This one had no author when I saw it, but I loved it. If the future doesn't excite you, if you don't get up in the morning with a feeling that invisible hands are pushing you to do what you have to do, you're in the wrong present. So today, what I'd like to be sure of, be happy about, is that we've been able to talk and that people know we have a program, but that this program can change. That the main thing is to know who you are, to know where you're going and where you will go. So from here, well, thanks, and I think we'll see each other again. I hope so, because there are many things we can take away.
I really like this phrase. You were asking me, psychiatrist. Why are you a psychiatrist? How did you come to be a psychiatrist? Because it moves me. Truly, it's fascinating. Sometimes the question is, why hasn't everyone become a psychiatrist?
You're in the right present.
Why isn't everyone interested in the mind? The mind is fascinating. It's wonderful. I enjoy my work every single day. Sometimes I'm exhausted and I leave the hospital practically on all fours. But I love it.
There are opportunities to get to know ourselves. There are ways to know ourselves. Today we've explained this here, and I really hope that all the young people who have been able to listen to this and who will listen take note of this, because their future will be much brighter. As I said today in the conversation we had with you, Fernando, the poem Ithaca by Constantine Cavafy, written in 1911, I believe that if you listen to it and really understand it, you won't have many more problems functioning in life, because life really is what this poem explains. And on top of that, the voice of Pepe Mediavilla, which is exceptional. So I recommend that you find your own Ithaca and focus on it.
When you set out on your journey to Ithaca, wish that your journey may be long, full of adventure, full of discovery. The Lestrygonians and the Cyclops, angry Poseidon, do not fear them. You will not meet such things in your path if your thoughts remain lofty. If rare excitement touches your spirit and your body. The Lestrygonians and the Cyclops, angry Poseidon, you will not meet them unless you carry them within your soul, unless your soul sets them up before you. Wish that your journey may be long, that the summer mornings are many, when, with such pleasure, with such joy, you will enter ports seen for the first time. Stop at Phoenician markets and purchase fine merchandise, mother of pearl and coral, amber and ebony, and sensual perfumes of all kinds, as many sensual perfumes as you can. Visit many Egyptian cities to learn and learn from scholars. Always keep Ithaca in your mind. To arrive there is your ultimate goal, but do not hurry the voyage at all. It is better to let it last for many years and to anchor at the island when you are old, rich with all you have gained on the way, not expecting that Ithaca will offer you riches. Ithaca has given you the beautiful voyage. Without her, you would never have set out on the road. She has nothing more to give you. And if you find her poor, Ithaca has not deceived you. Wise as you have become, with so much experience, you must already have understood what these Ithacas mean.
Know yourself, Marcos.
Fernando, thanks very much.
If you find the podcasts I'm doing interesting, subscribe.